In the small, quiet town of Riverside, there was a man everyone knew, but no one really understood. His name was Mr. Hayden. Every single day, without fail, he could be seen walking slowly through Main Street, dragging with him an old, battered suitcase. The case was scratched, dented, and looked like it could fall apart at any moment, yet he carried it everywhere he went. He never let it out of his sight, not once. Children whispered about him in hushed voices. Some called him the crazy man with the suitcase. Others dared each other to run up behind him and shout his name just to see if he'd react. Teenagers threw stones at his porch on summer nights, laughing when the old man would come storming out, clutching that suitcase tightly to his chest, as if it were more precious than life itself. The adults weren't much better. They avoided him when he walked down the street. In grocery stores, mothers would pull their children aside and whisper, "Don't stare, honey. Don't talk to him." To them, Hayden was a ghost that never went away, a relic of the past who had no place in their picture-perfect town. He lived in a broken-down house at the edge of town, a place everyone said should have been condemned years ago. The roof sagged, the windows were boarded up with mismatched planks, weeds grew waist-high in the front yard. There were rumors that inside the house smelled of mold, of dust, of old books and memories no one wanted. And always, always that suitcase never left his side. The strangest thing was, no one ever saw him open it. Not once in all the years he'd been wandering those streets. Not even when he sat alone on a bench in the park, staring into the distance with those tired gray eyes, did he ever unlatch the rusted locks. It was as if the contents were too sacred or too dangerous. The mystery of the suitcase became the town's favorite ghost story. Parents used it to scare their kids into behaving. Be careful, or the man with the suitcase will come for you. Teenagers made up theories. Some swore it was full of stolen money. Others said it contained the ashes of his dead family. One kid once saw Hayden talking to it late at night, whispering as though something inside could actually hear him. But to Hayden, the rumors meant nothing. Every day was the same routine. He walked to town carrying the suitcase. He bought a loaf of bread and black coffee from the corner store. He sat for an hour at the park, staring at the lake. Then he walked home, silent, alone, invisible. Until the night, everything changed. It was a Friday evening late in October. The air was sharp and cold, the kind of night when even the street lights seemed dimmer. The high school football game had just ended, and teenagers filled the streets still buzzing with energy. That's when it happened. A group of boys spotted Hayden walking down the alley behind the diner. They were laughing, showing off to the girls trailing behind them. One of them, Jason Reed, the quarterback, the golden boy of Riverside High, shouted, "Hey, suitcase man! What's in the box? Your brain?" The others roared with laughter. Hayden didn't stop walking. He kept his head down, clutching the suitcase tighter. Jason wasn't done. He grabbed a half-empty soda can and hurled it at Hayden's back. The old man stumbled, caught himself, and turned. For the briefest second, his eyes met Jason's, and in those eyes, there wasn't madness, there wasn't fear. There was fire. Jason faltered. He laughed it off, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Come on, old man, let's see what's inside. Show us your little secret." He lunged forward, and in that moment, Hayden did something no one in Riverside had ever seen him do. He dropped the suitcase to the ground, placed one hand firmly on top of it, and raised the other into the air. A sharp command,
like a soldier stopping a line of men in their tracks. The boys froze. It wasn't just the gesture, it was the authority in it, the precision, the way his voice, low and steady, cut through the night like a blade. Stand down. It wasn't the voice of a crazy man. It wasn't the voice of a tired recluse. It was the voice of someone who once commanded respect, obedience, fear. The alley fell silent. Jason muttered something under his breath, but his bravado was gone. The old man picked up his suitcase and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. No one noticed the thin crack that had appeared in the mystery that night, but soon the entire town of Riverside would, because the truth inside that suitcase was about to change everything.
The story of that alley spread faster than wildfire. By Monday morning, the whole town was whispering about Mr. Hayden. Teenagers who had once mocked him now replayed that single phrase he had spoken, "Stand down." The way he said it, the authority, the weight behind it. It didn't sound like a tired recluse. It sounded like a man who had once commanded armies. Jason Reed, the quarterback, tried to laugh it off, telling everyone it was nothing. But people noticed he avoided Main Street now. He flinched when he saw Hayden at a distance. And for the first time in years, the crazy man with the suitcase wasn't invisible. He was something else. And then, 1 week later, Riverside awoke to the sound of sirens. A house had caught fire on the east side of town. A two-story home, wooden frame, gone up in flames like dry paper. Neighbors stood outside in their nightclothes, pointing, crying, screaming for help. Inside, 2 children were trapped on the second floor, their mother sobbing helplessly in the yard. The fire trucks were late. Minutes felt like hours. Everyone stood frozen, helpless, waiting. Until someone stepped through the crowd. Hayden, carrying his suitcase. Without hesitation, he dropped it on the grass, ripped off his coat, and charged straight into the flames. People shouted at him to stop, that he'd kill himself, but he didn't even slow down. He disappeared inside the inferno. The crowd held its breath. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The flames roared louder. The roof sagged, and people began to cry. Then, through the smoke, a figure appeared. Hayden, coughing, burned, but alive. And in his arms, a little girl clinging to his neck. Behind him, stumbling down the stairs, with Hayden's arm guiding him, came the boy. The crowd erupted. The children were alive. Their mother collapsed to her knees, clutching them, sobbing into their hair. Firefighters finally arrived, too late to be the heroes that night, but everyone saw who had been. Hayden stood there, his shirt burned, his face black with soot. He walked back to the suitcase lying untouched in the grass, picked it up, and left without a word. From that moment on, Riverside's whispers turned into questions. Who was this man? Why did he move like a soldier? Why did he risk his life without hesitation? And most of all, what was in that suitcase? Theories spiraled out of control. People claimed it held weapons, medals, classified documents. One woman swore she saw Hayden opening it briefly in the park the day after the fire, just enough to catch a glimpse of something metallic gleaming inside. Others said it wasn't what was inside that mattered, but what it represented. The town that once mocked him now followed him. Strangers left food on his porch. Children waved when he walked past. Even Jason Reed, the golden boy, avoided his eyes in the hallway, too afraid to taunt him again. But Hayden ignored it all. He still followed his quiet routine. Main Street, the corner store, the park bench, the walk home. The only difference was, now people noticed him. They didn't laugh anymore. They wondered. And then something happened that would force the truth into the open. It was late November when the black car arrived in Riverside. It was sleek, government-issued, with tinted windows and plates no one recognized. It parked across the street from Hayden's broken-down house, and two men in dark suits stepped out. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as the men knocked on Hayden's door. He opened it, suitcase in hand, and for the first time in decades, someone saw him smile. The conversation was short, quiet, but when the men left, Hayden didn't close his door. He walked out onto his porch, carrying the suitcase, and for the first time ever, he spoke to the town. "You've all wondered," he said, his voice carrying strong and steady across the street, "what's in here, why I carry it, why I never let it go." Dozens of people gathered, stepping closer, holding their breath. Hayden knelt, set the suitcase on the porch, and flicked the rusty locks open. The crowd leaned in. The lid creaked. And inside, rows of neatly folded uniforms, faded but pristine. A set of medals, glinting gold in the porch light. And at the very top, wrapped in velvet cloth, a photograph of a unit of soldiers, all smiling, all young, with Hayden standing front and center. The old man looked up at the crowd. His voice broke as he whispered, "I was never carrying weight. I was carrying memory." The silence was suffocating. Some people gasped, others wept. The children stared wide-eyed at the medals, at the man they'd called crazy for years. And for the first time, Riverside saw Hayden not as a recluse, not as a ghost, but as a soldier who had given everything and was still carrying the burden of what he had lost. But the suitcase's secret wasn't just about the past, because the men in the black car weren't finished with him. And soon, the entire town would realize Hayden's story wasn't over. It was only just beginning.
After that night on the porch, Riverside was never the same. People stopped calling Hayden the crazy man with the suitcase. They started calling him the soldier. Kids pointed when he walked by, whispering in awe instead of laughter. Mothers nodded respectfully. Even the sheriff tipped his hat when their paths crossed. But Hayden didn't bask in it. He carried on as always, suitcase in hand, walking his quiet route. Only now, everywhere he went, eyes followed, and rumors grew louder. Who were the men in the black car? Why did Hayden smile when he saw them? And most importantly, why had they come back? Jason Reed, the quarterback, was the loudest skeptic. Sitting in the diner with his friends, he scoffed loud enough for everyone to hear. Medals? Old uniforms? So what? My grandpa's got those in the attic. Doesn't make him some hero. That guy's just a washed-up fossil who got lucky pulling kids out of a fire. But even as he said it, his friends shifted uncomfortably. Jason could mock, but deep down, everyone else knew Hayden wasn't like other old men. There was something sharper in him, something dangerous simmering just beneath the surface. That truth became undeniable 2 weeks later. It was a freezing December evening when the black car returned. This time, it wasn't 2 men who stepped out, it was 4. Same suits, same hard faces, same eyes that scanned the street like hawks. They moved with precision, like soldiers, like Hayden. Neighbors pretended not to watch, but curtains lifted, doors cracked open. They gathered in silence as the men approached Hayden's porch. The suitcase sat beside him, as always, like part of his body. One of the men spoke, voice clipped and cold. "Mr. Hayden, we need you to come with us." The air felt like it froze. Hayden didn't move, didn't blink. Not anymore. That life ended years ago. The man's jaw tightened. "You don't have a choice." The crowd gasped when the men stepped closer, hands reaching. But Hayden's hand landed on the suitcase. His fingers tapped it once,
an almost imperceptible signal, and the men froze. "Don't," Hayden growled, low and commanding. "You remember what happened last time someone tried?" The way he said it, the last time, sent shivers down every spine. Jason Reed, watching from across the street, laughed nervously. "What's in there, huh? A gun? Bomb? He's bluffing." But when Hayden slowly stood, the men backed away. Government men, trained, confident, backed away from a 70-year-old man with a suitcase. That night, Riverside learned something terrifying. Hayden wasn't just a soldier. He was someone these men, whoever they were, feared. The next day, the sheriff tried to visit Hayden's house. The curtains were drawn, the lights off. The door was locked tight. Hayden didn't answer. It was as though he had vanished. For 3 days, Riverside held its breath. And then, the suitcase appeared. On the park bench, alone. No Hayden in sight. Kids on their bikes circled it at a distance, too afraid to get close. Adults muttered nervously, wondering if they should call the police. Jason Reed, desperate to regain his status, strutted forward with his friends, watching. "See? Told you he's a fraud. He ditched it." He kicked the suitcase. It didn't budge. He kicked again, still solid, unmoving, as if bolted to the ground. "Pathetic," Jason spat, bending to grab the handle. "Let's see what's inside." The moment his fingers brushed the metal, the air filled with a sharp click, a sound that made every adult in the park freeze. Jason jerked his hand back like he'd touched fire. The suitcase had armed itself. Children screamed, mothers pulled them away. The sheriff arrived within minutes, shouting for everyone to back off. But when he approached, the suitcase clicked off. Silent, harmless, waiting. And then, as if on cue, Hayden emerged from the trees, calm, unshaken. "Curiosity, that's how people die," he said, voice like gravel. He picked up the suitcase effortlessly. This time, everyone gave him space. Even Jason, pale and sweating, couldn't force a word out. But something had changed. Hayden wasn't just a man with memories anymore. He wasn't just a relic of the past. That suitcase wasn't just about medals. It was something else, something alive, something dangerous. That night, lights flickered on in Hayden's house for the first time in years. Neighbors swore they saw shadows moving inside, figures that weren't his. Some claimed they heard a piano playing faintly through the walls, a haunting, mournful melody. The whispers turned into a single, chilling question that swept across Riverside. If Hayden wasn't just carrying the past, what exactly was he preparing for? Because whatever it was, it hadn't happened yet, but it was coming.
Winter hit Riverside hard that year. Snow piled on rooftops, power lines sagged under the weight of ice, and nights stretched endlessly. But for all its small-town charm, Riverside no longer felt safe. Not since Hayden's suitcase had revealed its nature. Everywhere he went, people moved aside. Kids whispered about him like he was a ghost story. Jason Reed didn't mock anymore. He avoided Hayden entirely. Even the sheriff admitted privately, "I don't know if I'm protecting him or if I should be protecting people from him." And then, one Friday evening, the lights went out. At first, it seemed like a normal power outage, but when the entire grid failed, streetlights, phones, even the emergency radios, the town realized this wasn't an accident. It was planned. Darkness swallowed Riverside whole. Only one house remained lit, Hayden's. The glow spilled from his windows like a beacon in the snowstorm.
Within minutes, frightened families gathered outside, shivering, desperate for answers. Hayden opened a door without hesitation. He didn't speak, just stepped aside, letting them in. The old soldier's home looked nothing like anyone had imagined. Maps covered the walls, pins marking cities across the globe. Shelves overflowed with notebooks, strange devices, even a shortwave radio crackling faintly with static. In the corner, always within reach, sat the suitcase. Hayden stood tall in the flickering light, his voice steady, commanding, the voice of someone who had led men through fire before. "This isn't just a blackout," he said. "They've come back, and this time they won't be hiding in cars." The crowd shifted nervously. Mothers held children tighter. The sheriff demanded answers. "Who's they, Hayden? If you know something, you'd better speak plain." Hayden's eyes flicked to the suitcase. Then, for the first time, he told a story. Decades ago, Hayden wasn't just a soldier. He was part of something larger, something the government buried deep, a unit so secret it didn't exist on paper. Their mission: stop threats the world wasn't ready to face. Not nations, not wars, something else. And the suitcase? It wasn't luggage. It wasn't medals. It wasn't even his. It's a key, and they've been trying to take it back for 40 years. Before anyone could question him further, the radio in the corner crackled to life. A distorted voice cut through the static. "Phase 1 complete. Proceeding to extraction." The room froze. Hayden snapped into motion, opening the suitcase. Inside wasn't what anyone expected. No bombs, no metals. Instead, layers of folded documents, strange metallic devices, and at the very bottom, a small black cube humming with faint golden light. The crowd gasped. Hayden's face hardened. "They're not coming for me," he said. "They're coming for this." Suddenly, a low vibration shook the ground. Outside, engines roared in the snow. Dark vans slid silently into town, headlights off, tires crunching across ice. Doors slammed. Figures in black, masked and armed, spilled into the streets. The sheriff swore under his breath. "Who the hell are they?" Hayden snapped the suitcase shut. "Not men you want to meet." The house went silent. Children whimpered. And then the first window shattered. Gunfire tore into the night. The people of Riverside ducked, screamed, clung to the floor. Hayden didn't flinch. With the calm of someone who had lived this 100 times before, he reached beneath the suitcase, pressed something hidden. A panel in the floor slid open, revealing a narrow stairway. "Basement! Now! Move!" No one argued. Families rushed down, herded by Hayden's commanding voice. The sheriff stayed behind, revolver in hand, trembling. Hayden set the suitcase on the table and faced the broken window. The masked men were coming fast. Shadows moved across the porch. The sheriff raised his weapon, but Hayden stopped him with a single word: "Wait." The doorknob twisted. The front door burst open, and Hayden moved. He wasn't a frail old man anymore. He moved with the speed of someone half his age, every strike precise, every motion lethal. In seconds, the first intruder was down. The sheriff could barely process what he was seeing. Hayden wasn't defending himself. He was fighting like a man who had been waiting his entire life for this night. But there were too many. Shadows poured in, wave after wave. Hayden fought fiercely, but even he couldn't hold forever. The sheriff fired wildly, the sound deafening. Still, the house shook with footsteps, gunfire, shouts. In the basement, children cried as dust fell from the ceiling. Mothers prayed. And then, silence. No more gunfire, no more footsteps, just silence. The sheriff's revolver clattered to the floor upstairs. Hayden's voice, low but steady, called down the stairwell. They're not stopping. This town is in their way now. He lifted the suitcase, which means it ends tonight.
Snow drifted silently across Riverside as the echoes of gunfire faded into the night. Hayden stood in the ruins of his living room, breath heavy, body battered, the suitcase clutched tight in one hand. Broken glass glittered at his feet. The sheriff, pale and trembling, leaned against the wall, too stunned to speak. Outside, the vans still waited. Their engines hummed like predators circling prey. More masked figures poured into the street, forming a ring around the old soldier's house. Their discipline, their numbers, this was no ordinary strike team. "Hayden," the sheriff whispered hoarsely, "we can't hold this. They'll kill everyone." Hayden's jaw tightened. His eyes didn't leave the window, didn't leave the men slowly closing in. "That's why you're not gonna hold it. I am." The sheriff shook his head. "That thing in your suitcase, is it worth all this?" Hayden finally turned, his gaze sharp, almost inhuman. "It isn't about worth. It's about what happens if it falls into their hands. If they get this, Riverside, the world, doesn't walk away." Before the sheriff could respond, the house lights flickered, not from electricity, but from the faint, steady glow pulsing out of the suitcase. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls, rattling dishes in the cupboards. Down in the basement, children whimpered, clutching their mothers as the golden light bled through the cracks in the floor. Hayden unlatched the case one final time. The black cube inside shimmered, golden veins spreading across its surface, alive now in a way it hadn't been before. He touched it gently, almost reverently, and the cube responded. It expanded outward like liquid metal, reshaping, unfolding into something far larger than its size should allow. Strange symbols carved themselves into the air, glowing runes no one could understand. The sheriff stumbled back, crossing himself. What the hell is that?" Hayden didn't look away from the cube, the last piece of a war this world never knew it fought. The front door exploded inward before the sheriff could ask more. Masked soldiers stormed in, guns raised. Hayden didn't flinch. He picked up the cube, now radiating pure golden light, and the entire room erupted in a shockwave. The intruders were thrown back violently, slammed against walls, their rifles sparking uselessly. Hayden stood untouched at the center, the glow surrounding him like armor. "Go!" Hayden barked at the sheriff. "Get them out of town." "I'm not leaving you!" the sheriff shouted, though his voice cracked with fear. Hayden gave a half-smile, the kind of smile only a man who had already made peace with death could wear. "You don't have a choice." He shoved the sheriff toward the basement, and with a heavy heart, the lawman obeyed, racing to lead the families out through the storm. That left Hayden alone, alone with the men in black, alone with the cube pulsing like a heartbeat in his hands. The leader of the intruders stepped forward. His mask was different, darker, heavier, and his voice when he spoke chilled the room. "You've kept it long enough, Hayden. Hand it over. You know it isn't yours." Hayden's eyes narrowed. "It's mine as long as I'm breathing." The leader's laugh was low, almost pitying. "Then let's fix that." The soldiers surged again, but Hayden wasn't just an old man anymore. The cube amplified him, fueled him, made him the warrior he once was and more. His movements blurred, his strikes cracked like thunder. Every swing, every motion carried the force of something beyond human. But the enemy didn't stop coming. For every one he dropped, two more pressed forward. The house shook, walls collapsing, flames catching on splintered wood. Snow blew in through shattered windows, hissing on the fire. And then Hayden realized the truth. He could fight until dawn, but he couldn't win. Not here. Not like this. Unless
He lifted the cube high. Its glow became blinding, flooding the night, flooding the entire town. Even from miles away, farmers later claimed they saw it, a column of golden fire stabbing into the sky. The leader screamed, "Don't you dare!" Hayden's voice cut through the chaos, strong and unyielding. "You should have stayed in the shadows." And then he slammed the cube into the ground. The world erupted. A wave of golden light swallowed Riverside. Windows shattered for miles. Snow turned to steam. For one terrifying moment, the night became day. The masked soldiers screamed, then were gone, erased as if they'd never existed. And when the light finally faded, silence fell. The house was gone, the vans were gone, the soldiers were gone. All that remained was a smoking crater in the snow, and the faint outline of an old man's boots burned into the ground. Hayden was gone too. The sheriff and the townsfolk, huddled on the ridge outside of town, stared in stunned silence. Mothers held their children tighter. Some wept, some prayed. No one spoke. Finally, the sheriff whispered, "He saved us." For weeks, no one dared step into the crater. Riverside rebuilt slowly, but whispers of Hayden never faded. Some swore he saw him in their dreams. Others claimed to hear his voice on the wind at night. And sometimes, when the snow fell just right, a faint golden glow flickered under the ice, as if Hayden wasn't gone, as if he was waiting.